Daily Shadow Work. In this video, we will be discussing why it is so important to walk boldly into our shadow selves, why it is so important to accept our dark sides, and how we can use this as the most powerful fuel to teach us how to love ourselves and ultimately to share that love with others. Tips for daily actions will be shared at the end, so be sure to take notes. And anytime I say anything that touches your heart or resonates with you, right here, touch your heart. So what is our shadow anyway? Well, our shadow is anything about us that we don't want or we don't want to own. Whether that be the murderous part of us that we don't want to admit is there, or the glamorous part of us that we don't want to admit is there. The parts of us we don't want to admit are there. And every potential that exists in every human DNA exists in every human DNA. It means it exists in us too. Do we have to root out every single possibility? No. But there are possibilities within ourselves that we need to accept. Our own selves. Things stemming from when we were children, or things stemming from past lives, or however you want to see it. Things stemming from the past. Or the anxiety of our possible future. And we all have a dark side. We all have a shadow. Those parts of ourselves we don't want to admit exist. We all have them. So, while we're accepting this point, I love myself. I am enough. I am free. It's not very difficult to actually admit to the darkest parts of us, but it is hard to admit to the light part of us. Because that person that's up there on the stage, we don't want to admit that that exists in us. It exists right here too. Think about that. It's not our darkness we fear. We're comfortable in the darkness because we don't have to see anything. When we're up there in the spotlight, when we're up there being the best, when we're up there living our best possible life, that is also part of it. It's called the light shadow. The brighter the light, the starker the shadow. Well, I'll tell you what, the brighter the light, the more it disappears, and when there's no shadow, that's when we really begin to get afraid. Because we have no point of reference. Our shadow helps us to be able to look around and to navigate. If it weren't for shadows, if it was all light, it's hard to determine crisp edges, especially if everything's bright and white. So, there are a lot of us who revel in our darkness and use it against ourselves and the world at large. I did and still do to some extent. We all do. It's a comfort zone. It's a comfort zone. It's much easier to be weak and say, I can't do that, than to be strong and say, I can do that and stand out from the herd. It's much easier to say, that can't be done, than to actually go do it. Especially in our own personal lives. I can't take care of that. I'm not a professional. You don't have to be a professional. You just have to be curious. Ask the average former addict that's actually off their drugs and alcohol and whatever. They don't have to be professionals. They can be led by professionals, but they don't have to be professionals. They just had to do the work. It's the same for all of us. We just have to do the work. Those old habits of hiding behind our masks can be so ingrained in our brains that they seem impossible to change. Those habits are actually groups of thoughts. They look like a forest in our brains. Dr. Caroline Leaf and other neurobehavior scientists have actually been able to image live thoughts and how they work and how they look. And it looks like trees in a forest with roots. Now think about that. You got a root ball, and you got a stem, that we call a trunk. You got limbs, and over here, and there's billions or trillions of them. Can't see the forest for the trees. Well, sometimes you can't see the trees for the forest. And those individual thoughts that are trees, sometimes we can't see the individual ones. But they all start with a feeling. The feeling creates a thought, creates an image, creates a feeling, creates a thought, creates, and then becomes, it's just greater, greater, and greater. Well, now what are we supposed to do? Now the hamster wheel is taking over the hamster. And have you ever seen what happens when the hamster's on the hamster wheel and the hamster takes over? And the hamster's sitting there going, oh, I wasn't expecting that. But it happens with our thoughts, with a lot of things in our lives. It's consistent. But Hawk, what does this have to do with my shadow? Well, our shadow expresses itself in our habits of thoughts and actions. Eating that ice cream, smoking those cigarettes, drinking that beer or that whiskey or those joints or those heroines, whatever it is. Whatever it is. So what we think we feel and what we feel we reel. What we feel we reel. You gotta feel it to reel it. If you have to see it to believe it, you've got the law of attraction and assumption, backwards. Because you have to see it here. You have to feel it to reel it. You have to believe it to see it. So you have to believe you're healed. You have to see yourself healed before you can see yourself healed. You have to see the end result before you can figure out the problem. If I say, okay, here's where I'm starting. Here's where I want to end up. I'm not sure I understand the middle steps, but here's where I'm starting and here's where I want to end up. And then the steps fill in along the way. But if I say, here's where I'm starting, I'm not sure where I want to end up, then the steps can be all over the place, and I may not end up where I want to be. Just like Columbus. Here's where I'm starting, here's where I want to be. So I'm going to sail and sail. Okay, sail and sail. Oh, look, I'm where I want to be. No, I'm only 10,000 miles away from where I want to be. But the fact of the matter was, he knew where he wanted to go from where he was. He just didn't get there. And it was another, 600 years before they dug a big ditch through the middle of Panama so that everybody could travel on through and go all the way around the world without ever touching dry land. It's pretty amazing. So part of my shadow skills, things that most people wouldn't know just by looking at me, is that I trained to kill human beings from the age of 6 to the age of 50. And I'm talking daily, active study of the human anatomy, techniques, and mental exercises based on one thing: permanently removing or destroying any and all threat. Why did I do that? For 44 years of my life, and still spotty in between, some kind of something, because of that habit of thought. Every day something comes up. Why did I do that? Because of what I've been going through. Because I was raped when I was 4. Because I was exposed to combat. Because there was threat everywhere. It's not hyperactivity disorder. It's hyper-awareness disorder. It's not that I couldn't pay attention to any one thing. When allowed safety time to focus on what I wanted to focus on, I could sit and focus for hours, days even, when I was allowed to. But there was no safe place for that most of the time. So when I did get the chance to, it was great. But otherwise, I was focusing on the 4 to 10 million threats. I was focusing everywhere for threat. That's not That's not attention deficit disorder. That's placing attention every single where. That's not a deficit. That's hyper-awareness disorder. That's where that child, and I know this from my own experience, I was looking every single place I could for threat. Every single place I could. Is it behind me? Is it in front of me? Is it above me? Is it below me? Where's the threat coming from? Is it silent and angry from dad? Or is it vicious, loud, and hateful from mom? Is it some mix from one of the two? Or from a teacher? Or from a sister? So I thank God I have never had to use my knowledge. And I pray I never need to, yet my habit mind still runs daily scenarios. Whether it's an imagined fight or argument, my habit mind is still working on the threat and how to remove it. Now, does this mean that I'm evil? No. This means that I trained my mind at a very early age to assess for threat and have a plan to remove it. An old special forces saying is have a plan to kill everybody in the room and every reason not to use it. Well, I read that very early in life and took it to heart. So, how about looking at pictures of girls in bikinis, or thinking about using drugs I no longer use, or thinking about drinking, or scenarios where I'm a rock star for real, a great public speaker who is addressing thousands weekly, a world-renowned author of fiction and non-fiction. These are all shallow elements, both light and dark. So, why don't we take a little break for a moment? I am enough. I love myself. I am free. I am enough. I love myself. I am free. I am enough. I love myself. I am free. Thank you for accepting your shadow and loving you. Thank you for healing. Thank you for subscribing. So, Huck, what can I do to accept my shadow even more? In fact, how do I even find my shadow? Well, just look in the mirror with loving kindness and make a list of all the inner and outer things you do not like about yourself or are afraid of. If you don't like your nose, write it down. You don't like the way your eyes look, write it down. You don't like the way you're feeling, write it down. Make a list of everything you do not like about yourself, whether good or bad. Whether it's things you think you can do or things you think you can't do, write it down. Whether it's things you think you shouldn't do or things you think you should do, write it down. There's your shadow. There's your shadow. Huck, how do I empower myself? How do I overcome my shadow? You don't. You don't. You don't overcome your shadow. You are already empowered, and your shadow is your best friend. And it's informing you of your power. You don't have to overpower your shadow. You may have to overpower your ego. But you don't have to overpower your shadow. By looking at your shadow with love, you have already acknowledged and empowered yourself. The fact that you're watching this video shows that to be true. And now, for some daily actions to help reinforce and bolster your confidence. When those ooky thoughts come up, you say, hey, I see you. I bless you. I accept you. I love you. This habit lets those parts have those thoughts, and they know it's okay to be there. And the thing about it is, by knowing it's okay for those thoughts to be there and those feelings to be there, they begin to lie down like a baby in a bed. Okay, it's okay. It's safe to be here. All right. And they begin to make less noise. Hands on our hearts. every day in every way, I am getting better, better, and better. Better, better, and better. Better, better, and better. So, Lisa Nichols has given us a very powerful morning habit. And this one is, she calls it mirror work. And there's all kinds of mirror work. I mean, if you put mirror work in YouTube, boom, you're going to find a bunch. I'm sure you'll find hers. I really like this one. This one is, put your hands on your heart just like we've been doing. You look in the mirror and you're using your name and you're looking in your eyes with as much love as you can. And you say, Hawk, I'm proud of you for getting out of bed today. And then you list 7 different things. Hawk, I'm proud of you for 7 different things. And make sure you use your name every single sentence. Then, Hawk, I forgive you for not changing your underwear this morning. And come up with 7 things. And use your name. And then lastly, Hawk, I commit to you that. Hawk, I commit to you that we're still going to shoot these videos. 7 different things, and use your name. Since I've started doing this, and I am enough, I love myself, I am free. Wow. My meditation has improved as far as my concentration on my mantra. But not only that, but my feeling about myself, my comfort level with myself, my anxiety has not necessarily lessened, but has, well, yes, it has lessened. It's dropped, but it's not as in my face, so to speak. I highly suggest downloading the Mind Valley app and simply listening to Vishen Lakhiani's 6-phase meditation every morning after the mirror work. It's free. It's free. I mean, it's free. And all you got to do is sit there and listen to it. I would suggest downloading a frequency app and putting in 528 hertz, and also downloading a brainwaves app and setting it for theta, or whatever, you know, he suggests. I set mine for theta. But, you know, that's a great little app. And that 6-phase meditation is incredible. It's scientifically researched. It's not just a bunch of Buddhist monks sitting around, or other monks sitting around. They used them as the baseline for setting their machines up. It's incredible. Another way that we can live with the shadow, another way that we can empower ourselves, another way we can bring that shadow to the forefront and say, hey, how can you empower me? Is to live the 5 agreements by Don Jose and Miguel Ruiz. Be impeccable with our word, truthful and compassionate, to and about ourselves and all others, to never take anything personally, to never make assumptions because we know we don't know what's going on, to always do our best even though we realize our best of today is not our best of yesterday or tomorrow, but it's the best we can do in the moment, and to always remain skeptical because we don't know what we don't know. Those are just some very simple things. So as always, hands on our hearts. I love myself. I am enough. I am free. What an incredible, incredible feeling to be free. You can use my shadow work integration method. It's here available on YouTube, and it's free. And this video over here will also help you to understand yourself better. I love you. I truly do. Namaskar.